83% of CEOs mentioned that they believe full work in office will return in 3 years. In 3 years.
83%.
You tell me, what is your prediction?
Welcome to the inaugural episode of Beyond the Blueprint, a podcast brought to you by Connexus Studio, where we dive deep into the future of work and discuss how innovative strategies are influencing the way we collaborate and thrive. I'm your host, Brendan, and today we are discussing an interesting topic on flexible work arrangement and how its impact on the workplace. As more and more companies are embracing flexible work, how can we set up the workplace that not only accommodates this new arrangement, but also improve employees' satisfaction and also drive company success? So to answer this question, I'm thrilled to be joined by two incredible guests. Rohit Novindrus, who is a leading expert in redefining workspaces for the future. He's the head of workplace consulting, occupier strategy and solutions at Knight Frank Singapore. And of course, Eugene Chang, CEO of Leadership Choices and Transition Strategies, who brings a wealth of experience in guiding companies and their leadership through complexities of adapting to new work paradigms. Thank you both for being here with me. As you all know, the tripartite guidelines for flexible work arrangement come into effect 1st December 2024. Essentially, this guideline outlined the process for employees to formally request for flexible work arrangement and also for employers to consider and respond to these requests appropriately. Right? The guideline, as we know, touch on three key areas: flexi load, flexi time, as well as flexi place, which essentially means that we can work anywhere outside of the office, including telecommuting, as well as working from home. So while it's not compulsory for the company to do so, but employers are encouraged to consider implementing flexible work arrangement for their employees, or we call it the FWA, right? So I'd like to start off with asking Eugene this question: why the implementation of these guidelines right now, and how seriously should employers take these guidelines? Because after all, since the last few years, there's already some sort of flexible work in place in a lot of companies out there.
Good. Thank you so much, Brendan, for having me. I'm not quite sure about the rationale behind the timing of it all, but I can say is that it's about time. Large companies all around the world have already been using FWA as a means to improve the way they attract talent, the way they motivate talent for the longest time. It's just that when the law comes into place, or when government helps to promote some of these initiatives, this is a late stage play, right? So we are playing catch up. I believe the Singapore government is actually quite progressive. So whenever they do something like that, they are looking ahead. They're looking at seeing how can Singapore and Singapore companies use something like FWA to their advantage to attract talent from the global space, from the region, and make their workplaces a far better place to work in. So essentially, I think that it would be advantageous to our organizations to start considering FWA if they're not already doing that. Organizations actually are in a two-front battle. They're either trying to win customers or they're trying to win talent, right? The talent that's required to create the services and deliver them to customers. So FWA could play a wonderful kind of role in helping our local companies or even companies that are just operating out of Singapore to be able to reach out to maybe talent pools that they never considered before.
Because the guidelines have to be, we are quite clear that the guidelines only require everybody to ponder, to consider whether is it practical, is it sustainable to do flexible work arrangement. It will not tell you or dictate that you have to adopt flexible work arrangement.
But you cannot give the excuse that it's never been done before.
Yeah.
We need to see our employees to make sure that they're doing their work. Some of these things are just old management biases or practices, right? So what the government is trying to nudge companies to do is have fresh eyes and start re-looking at the possibilities. That's all.
And few years after COVID, now we know that we have tested many ways that we can apply flexible working arrangement, whether it's time, space, or load, and be productive. So the work can be done. As you said, there is no excuse. It's all about shifting the perspective, looking at in the long term, and see now how we implement it with future thinking, with future foresight. Our organization is going to grow with its people, and people have different needs, and they like to be supported by organization.
But what do you think are the challenges that implementing FWA, in the workplace, that all this HR will face?
It depends on who you ask.
Yeah.
I think for HR, it would be, of course, coordinating all of these different requests. My belief is that FWA needs to be personalized, right? Everyone looks at, flexible work in a different way. They have different needs. And so the best way for HR to do this is to have a baseline policy and then start to actually personalize some of these benefits for employees. So it's going to be hard to track. I do think managers who will be involved in implementing this will also find it difficult to have all these different implementations. However, I think the upside is great. For management, sometimes it's difficult to get, even like maybe HQ to agree on some of these things, or you might be concerned about your customer or productivity. A lot of these things factor in. So I would say even in implementation, how do you measure whether it's a successful kind of initiative? Do employees understand? Do they see it as fair, or do they see it as something that's not equitably rolled out? So some of these things we need to be concerned about.
I think also, yes, there will be some challenges in terms of learning curve, how to implement it, how to adopt this new way of working. But ultimately, this is a strategic tool for the leadership, for organizations, how to kind of have a more long-lasting and deeper relationship with their employees. And I think for the organization as well as the workplace, this will help for better sense of gravity in the organization. So employees will have a better connection when they see that their need for flexibility is acknowledged and supported in more nuanced way. And I think you both, with the capacity of your wealth of experience, you have seen in the market a lot that some of these practices are actually not new, have been in the market a lot, long time ago. But now we are looking at it in terms of a guideline, which means that we are looking at it in a more systemically. We are looking at it in a way that the need to a broader kind of market exposure has to be acknowledged. Not only big MNCs, but also smaller companies, and the employees in the smaller companies can actually raise their voice and look into the areas that flexible working can help them.
Yeah, I think earlier Eugene mentioned that it kind of is kind of a catch up with the rest of the companies that have not done so.
Yeah.
In fact, the last few years, we have worked with a lot of more progressive organizations that have already made flexible work as part of their organization setup. And I think in terms of their workplace, they also have done the correspondingly adjustment just to support this flexible work arrangement, right? So, but do you think that with this flexible work arrangement, businesses can still drive innovations and keep up with their competitive advantage if they allow people to do flexible work?
I do think that flexible work arrangements need to be applied on a company by company basis. So, for example, if you're in a highly innovative type of environment where you see companies like Grab, companies like Amazon, Tesla, Disney, they're all pushing back hard on FWA. So if you asked me this question 2 weeks ago, I would have given you a different answer. But you can see, 4 years later, as we learn about, what is really productivity, what kind of collaboration do you get, is innovation being affected by some of these policies, it's possible that for some industries, this may not work, right? And the fear now is that everybody is just using it as a blanket. Oh, did you see? Grab is saying no. This big brand is saying no. Maybe we should all say no. And I don't think that's the case. So if innovation is critical to your function and you need that innovation to occur in a common space where people are physically together, then maybe FWA is not the right move for you. So again, is it going to provide you that competitive advantage when you implement this is the key question. That's why I don't think it's a mandate that all companies have to take it on, but you have to assess for yourself. And even in those companies, there might be one or two individuals that might need special care. So if I'm a older worker and I have to be a caregiver, I might have to apply for this flexibility with my boss and say, hey boss, can I have Friday off because I need to send a family member, let's say, for dialysis, right? So, making those small adaptations for the workplace goes a long way for the employee. Again, no one size fits all.
Take one of my administrative managers. She has a commitment at home, and she have during the interview she expressed to me that she needs to be at home at a certain time to fetch the young kid from childcare and prepare dinner. Among all the candidates I interviewed, right, I find that she's the most appropriate to our culture in terms of skill level. But I just have to accept that there's a certain way to work around the flexi time. That is one of the key criteria of employment. And I think I'm quite happy to offer that kind of arrangement with her.
Just right after COVID, we were just thinking about work-life balance. Now, maybe we can say work-life integration. That there are many aspects of our life that is influenced directly or indirectly by our work and our workplace and how we come together at our workplaces.
I think work is life, life is work.
Well, we talk about wellness, we talk about the quality of time that we spend together at work. We talk about social aspects of work, our workspaces. I'm sure you agree in practical solutions. It's not only about a desk and computer. Is about the type of spaces that bring people together, sometimes planned, sometimes not planned, impromptu meeting, learning from each other, creating more opportunities of being together in a meaningful way, because then we feel more kind of stronger sense of belonging with our organization, with our workplace, and we feel more supported, then we take care of the business as well.
I want to pick up a little bit on what you said about workplace wellness. Massive movement out in the market. If you scroll on Instagram or whatever social media you like, people are talking about it all the time, right? So it's something real, I think. People are struggling with it. And I used to be quite judgmental about, the younger generation. I said, I been at work for 20 years and this has never really been an issue for me. But I also realized that work has changed in the last 5-10 years a lot, accelerating in the last 5 even more. And I'm feeling the pressure myself, right? And I'm thinking it's probably all this accelerated digital kind of devices and notifications all coming at me all at once. So there is no really work-life separation. There's no such thing as work-life balance, right? It's just how do you live with the interruptions of the devices and the demands of work that has bled into every aspect of our life. So then the question is, can we have a sustainable workforce and performance if we don't address it today? Because people burn out and they literally leave the industry. They don't just leave their job, they will leave the whole industry, right? And this is not good for your company, it's not good for your industry, it's not good for Singapore, it's not good for even the individual affected. So big thing here is workforce care needs to be front and center of every leader's mind, because it drives, again, loyalty, it drives motivation, it drives productivity. Leaders will not do this just because it's the right thing to do. Most leaders, right? Unfortunately, right? Just being practical here. But you can tie a lot of the performance of an organization sustainably to some of these initiatives that you do. And workforce, like flexible workforce arrangements, can actually be a useful tool for them to use to promote some of this sustainable performance.
And I think this is exactly why this wellness factor is exactly why we see that FWA is not a privilege, is a necessity, and also a strategic tool for the leadership.
You know what's interesting? I read a report out of the UK recently. They surveyed workers and they were willing to put or sacrifice 8.2% of their wage to have the right or the flexibility to work from home 2 to 3 times a day. So if you have 100K annual salary, it's $8,000, you're willing to give up just to not have to go into work every day because it is prioritized as such. And they might even come out on the positive because transportation costs and all these healthcare issues and stress, this really helps people. People really, really need, having tasted the forbidden fruit, a little bit of time away from the workplace to just get away from it sometimes. It doesn't mean that I want to work only 4 days a week, but I want to have the choice to work in a space that's maybe more comfortable because it's familiar, like home.
In fact, do you realize that the Gen Z population,
yes,
when they first started, working, it is the pandemic, right? I mean, they are in their mid 20s, later part of 20s. 4 or 5 years ago, when they started working, is when the pandemic came. So having this remote, flexible, telecommuting kind of way of working is really all that they know.
It's all they know. That's right.
And really, we have to consider a lot of this future workforce and what they are used to. And earlier you mentioned about it is not really it's a privilege, right? I think for sometimes the younger generation, it could be a necessity. And I think it's very interesting to hear from you that we can save salary about 5%. If we offer some kind of flexibility.
Yeah, because it's a total rewards kind of approach, right? So you don't just look in isolation, I give you this benefit and then I give you this salary. People look at the whole package. Am I working for a great brand? Do they have great climate? How are the leaders like? What kind of job do I have? And what are the benefits as well as the wages, right? Promotional aspects and things like that, career progression. So people look at it as a total package. And this is one arrow in your quiver that you can use to make your employee brand a whole lot better.
Is FWA an important key to employee wellness in this case?
Of course, I think so. I don't know. You have a different view.
I totally agree because the way I see it in grand scheme of things is that after the COVID, one of the big learning is that we are coming to office with purpose. And everybody is kind of now entitled, rightfully, everybody is entitled to think about this purpose, not to be told you have to come to office, but think like, okay, I'm going to office to do what? Because I can do certain things at home and I can still be productive. And maybe my boss also thinks the same. So why am I going to office? That is also why we are thinking of office spaces differently. We are thinking of creating office spaces with a stronger hook, with a sense of gravity that didn't exist before, because we want our people to be happy. Exactly what you said in the beginning, employee satisfaction is is not cosmetic. It really helps. I'm sure as business leader, you would agree that a happy employee will give you better result, and then an unhappy employee with wellness issues, I don't know, anxiety, concerns, or things that bothering him or her in life that carries over all those problems to work. So it's not a formula, but it's quite apparent that providing flexibility would really bring more balance in many aspects.
So Rohit, you earlier mentioned flexibility equal more balance, right? So in your work as a workplace strategist, right? So what are the some of the effective strategies for companies to create a flexible work experience that support their employees within the work environment?
Great question. We are also looking at the market and learning from different companies. What I've noticed in all successful companies, they implement a combination of these factors. Number one is flexible space arrangements, some sort of agile practice in terms of, let's say, desk sharing or creating spaces that are multi-use, creating spaces that are used in different seasons for different purposes. Another aspect is implementing data and technology in different aspects of work, not only in terms of connecting each other for a quick Teams meeting, but also in terms of monitoring our behavior, how we are using this space, how we are using the facilities in our office, and how we can make it more efficient and more meaningful. And we talked about wellness and sustainability. These are really big, and these are being taken seriously inside organizations. Sometimes we create a dedicated space for it. For instance, we have rest and relax rooms, or we have spaces for active wellness, like we have a games room, or we have areas that we can come together and celebrate something big, which is very important. And also appreciating wellness and sustainability in terms of the infrastructure of office, the quality of air, the quality of water, the food that we eat, all those kind of things together. I want to also emphasize on DEI. I think diversity in our workplaces are very important. We are creating more inclusive spaces. We are recognizing the diversity of people that are coming together and bringing different perspective to our work, helping our work in many aspects. And after all, we are creating really talent-centric workplaces. So I think these are some of the best practices we see all healthy organizations are appropriating in their workplace.
The mindset I think leaders need to take is that the workplace has now become a choice location for where work gets done. I can do it at home. It's no longer a place that I go to do work only. In fact, you could reconfigure the office to do more than just work, right? My question here is, what do you want it to be? So what vision do you have for this space that you're going to pay quite a lot for? Like Frank, right? You know how prices are in Singapore. Every square footage is important. So the question I have, for example, would be, what if we thought about the workplace as an innovation lab? What if we think about the workplace as a career enhancer, or just the ability for us to build culture, or an extension of my brand? Right? Or it's a revenue generating rather than a cost asset. I mean, I remember when we were looking at redesigning our workspace, we said, look, we spend so much money holding events out, in hotels and things like that. Why not build that space to our office, right? And we made it a flexible space. We could move walls around and we could reconfigure it. So when we're not having events, we're using it for ourselves. So by thinking about it differently, I could actually put paid work in combined meeting rooms, like a large training hall, and essentially generate revenue for the organization, right? So it depends on how you want to think about the space that you have. And I think that would really drive so many possibilities, right? So if workers feel like they can come in and treat them like adults, so they can come in anytime they need to, and they come in at any place, whether they can do it from home or here or the cafe, it really doesn't matter. What's key is that they're productive, they are able to connect with their teammates, and that they can maybe innovate together. So Brandon, I'm curious to know, how are you using your office space, being a space expert yourself? I mean, how do you envision the office place of tomorrow?
So when we first imagined our new office, right? So we want it to be all about collaboration, all about socializing. Yeah, because much of our work are all in digital, right? So I'm thinking that I already anticipated that a lot of the work designers can bring home, right? And then we do it at a time where there's all this hybrid working, flexible working. It's kind of buzzing. Yeah. So we really want to study this whole entire approach, and we realize that it will be quite relevant to what we do if I'm just simply making an office all about socializing and collaboration. So in fact, you guys have seen this office space, right? It's really about 50% of the entire office are designed to collaborate and socialize, right? We have a huge breakout area that we use as town hall, we use as a seminar location. We always have every 1 month or 2 months of a guest speaker coming to engage with our community. And then by having these kind of spaces also means that I realize that we are always having suppliers, vendors, right? That coming in, knocking on doors and asking for the presentation of their product, their solution. And I think this is really becoming a learning hub for our team members. So by having all these flexible spaces, and we find ourselves a lot more welcoming, a lot more flexible in hosting people that share knowledge about our industry, share the different so-called better way and better products in our office design. So and I think also as a way to show our client how similar they can also adapt their office design to meaningfully engage their internal staff and also their external stakeholders. Yeah. And I think talk about the technology. Of course, one thing I feel that implementation of technology should also be intuitive. Last time, in the olden days, we always try to be implementing too smart a technology and nobody knows how to do it. But I think out of the pandemic-wise, the solutions are getting more simpler and more accessible. So one of the criteria that I told my team is that we should implement smart office solutions that are easy and are also intuitive. So we do not overtake a whole entire office, I call it. So it's just to us at the right level where people still feel comfortable navigating the office spaces. Yeah, just the right level, nothing too complicated. Yeah. So I think that's out of our own experiences in designing our office space. Yeah.
And has been quite successful.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I just again, as I say, it has to be very natural, very organic, very, very intuitive. I think when it's done right, you should not feel that you are too deliberate in making the space too tacky or too deliberately trying to try too hard to pull people together. It should be very natural in terms of how people come together. Let's say if company really want to adopt flexible work arrangement for the staff, but will this the result measurable?
Yes.
And
okay.
how do you do that?
Super tricky question. I think you're putting me in a trap. But I do think, okay, when I first started thinking about this, I was doing the normal metrics like, what's the utilization? Are people using, 80% of the desk space and are running out of space? Did I do my calculation wrong?
Correct.
And things like that.
I think flexible place is easy to measure, right?
Yes.
I think Rohit does it most of the time. We do a hybrid office, flexi spaces. You can always measure, how they are being utilized, percentage of time. But I guess if you look at it in a more broad sense, flexi load, flexi time, then I guess is there a way to measure the success of?
There is.
Yeah.
So we go back to the business metrics or the talent metrics.
Mm-hmm.
Employee engagement, key one, right? Our employees happy. What's our productivity like? What is the innovation outcomes of having this policy in place? It's not specific to maybe that one policy, to be honest, right? FWA is just one of many things that you do to support. So you may have, a redesigned office space, you may have a FWA policy in place, you may have some other things that you surround in order to drive, let's say, innovation up. And then we just measure innovation. So I don't think we should look at each leg of the stool separately. We should look at the combined design that you have and see whether that delivers on the outcome that you're trying to achieve.
I really like this perspective you're suggesting. And I want to follow up on something you just mentioned. It's sometimes about revenue generation and sometimes about value creation. And ideally, most of the time, a combination of both.
Yes.
And I think with the outcome-driven kind of mindset, you can measure success by focusing on two things. One is better processes, efficiency in processes. When you enable flexibility and choice, you let people to be more productive and work together. You come up with solutions that your team would work together more efficiently and more productively. So the processes will continue to evolve for better efficiencies, I'm sure. Another thing is what you mentioned, employee engagement. So that target is basically creating a stronger sense of gravity in your office, bringing people together and making people to have that sense of belonging that they are really in charge of the office, they in charge of the space and the work, and they take care of your business.
So that brings me to my second point. FWA is not great for all employee profiles. For example, if you have a new or a young employee coming in, a fresh graduate, FWA is one of the worst things you could do for them.
You think so?
Yeah. Simply because they halve their learning by staying at home. They have no capital, relationship capital with anyone. When I started off on the floor in HP, we had an open bullpen already back then, right? In the 80s, 90s. 90s? Yeah, 90s. Late 90s, yes. Late 90s, okay. But what happened was that I could listen to the crosstalk that was happening, that my seniors were on the phone and they turn around and I could ask a quick question. All of that you miss when you're at home. It's very isolating, right? So if you look at all the studies that are out there, I think University of Chicago, Forbes, they have studies that show up to 20% of productivity has fallen as a result of being fully remote. Right? And then the question is, why is my pay 8%, 10% less in terms of progression when I'm fully remote versus those who are coming back a couple of times, a week? It's natural. Your relationship and your ability to form those connections with your supervisors and colleagues is missing. It's not mature yet. Yeah. So for young people, I would say during your probation period, come to work every day. Maybe one day a week, I might, give you a bit of a wellness break. Maybe it's too intense for you. But in general, they should really spend as much time as they can looking at the workplace, not as a workplace, as a learning space.
I'm coming to share because I think my line of work, even if I wanted to, is impossible to be working remotely or working from home. But I started my career as a young project coordinator, like assistant project manager. So it's impossible to be working from home or remotely, right? So you always have to go to site, always have to talk to all the workers or the foremen or the trade workers on site, right? But I think what you mentioned is it resonates quite similarly, right? As a young person, coming to the workforce, all this interaction really build up my knowledge of the industry. I remember I would just squat on the floor with the electrical worker, with the partition worker, discussing the little detailing, and that's really I start off with.
Yeah.
So learning not just in school where everything's on theory, but I realized that a lot of things on the ground are very different, and when I'm talking to the people that are doing the job, then you realize, there's so much of a real world example that you have to pick up, and all this relationship and this friendship that I have forged in my earlier years, that's 20 over years ago. I think still today, having a lot of them as business friends.
Yes.
So I think that opportunity that I was able to have interacting with people, learning practical so-called way of working, that is quite invaluable.
Yes, formative moments.
Yeah.
You I don't think is a good application of the FWA. But after that, once they've demonstrated they can be independent, responsible for self. Now, when they first start, they're dependent on someone else to give them instructions and teach them and all that. But once they become independent contributors, I think then the FWA becomes far more sensible. Right. So for me, FWA has to be sensible. Not all populations should have full access to this in various extremes. One of the reasons why you see these big companies pushing back, especially in the tech world, is because it's not working for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody is missing out on this, right? And they're looking at the data and they're saying, we're not innovating fast enough, or we're not having the productivity we need. Something is not working. So you can't just say, listen to the employee, we're more productive. Every survey of employees says that they're more productive. Right? Nobody's going to tell you that they're less productive at home, because I'm sure it's a little bit biased. And any survey that you ask employers, in fact, there is a study, KPMG, September 2024, CEO Outlook report.
That's
83, very recent. 83% of CEOs mentioned that they believe full work in office will return in 3 years. In 3 years.
In 3%.
You tell me, what is your prediction? I don't know if these guys will retire by then, but this is crazy. That means for some, especially for business leaders, the balance is out of whack.
This is exactly what I really like about this FWA guideline, because it doesn't tell that there is X number of days in a month that everybody should work flexibly. If they force anything at all, it is having the conversation with the people.
Exactly.
They're acknowledging that it should be sensible to the context, and every business is unique, every organization is unique. So they are just telling that organizations should open up this conversation with the people, acknowledge their right, and like build something together with them about the aspect of flexibility in their work. And that is exactly the change management that you said. Involve people in the process of decision making about the arrangement of their work. And it's not a top-down communication. It is like employee can ask first. That's how the guideline is suggesting. Mm-hmm. Employee can ask first. An employer needs some time to get back to it with reasonable response.
Yeah, 2 months, right?
Yeah.
But so this is where I would lean in on the advice, right? So rather than wait for your employees to come to you one-to-one, it's because a very reactive kind of individualized response to FWA. Yeah. It should be seen as a strategic opportunity.
Yeah.
How can we use FWA at the enterprise level to deliver on the advantages that we want in the market. So you start thinking and engaging the whole workforce in that collaborative co-creation conversation early, and then you set certain broad policies that are easier for maybe at the managerial level to grant to their individual work teams. That's where I think empowerment comes in. So seize control. If you're an organizational leader, seize control of the conversation, do the thinking up front, and then you watch and see and learn and experiment. It doesn't mean you cannot reverse course, but it means that we need to be smart in the way we use these tools. I mean, there's a nice quote by Albert Einstein. He says, the problems that are created by this level of thinking cannot be solved by the same level of thinking, essentially, right? So we do need to elevate the way we think in order for us to solve the problems of work of old. The office space as infrastructure is just hardware to support the software, right? So, I mean, I will come from the people angle, and I always say, what's the software that we put and operate out of the hardware in order for things to work seamlessly. So holistic again, looking at how these things can pair up, your people policies, your, flexible work arrangements, all that together with the way you design your office, what you want the workplace to look like, or can be, whatever function that is you envision to come together, right? So I don't think it's, we design one thing and then we add on something else. It's better if we do it all together if we can.
And holistically.
Yeah.
I like that you emphasized on user experience because that is the angle that kind of like is a barometer of whether our solutions are successful. Because if we focus on how people are appreciating all these changes and relating to these changes, and when people are comfortable, when people are performing better, so we know that the changes that we made are working.
I think to me another way is another approach is that I always like the space to evolve itself. So we cannot be too deliberate in our design. We cannot be too specific that this space and then this area, this counter must be used for that, and that notice board must be used for that. So sometimes I look at happy work places are really organic, right? So people grow into it. People start to use their spaces into the ways that you never think about, and I like to see that happening around the office, and I think that will be a very clear indication of a great office space. Rohit, what other trend you see in office design?
So we talked a lot about flexible work arrangement, and I think we had a good start on that as a society, and we are learning more and more about successful practices of flexible work arrangement implemented in our offices and with our organizations. So we will continue developing our learning on that. We will continue learning from each other. And one immediate aspect of this I would expect to see is our office designs are becoming a bit more sensitive to higher experiential qualities that we bring to our offices. Currently, there are a lot of research showing that noise distractions and things like that are increasing in our open office spaces because perhaps we emphasize too much on people being connected, but we didn't provide enough acoustic facilities for that. Maybe there are more holistic solutions in terms of when should we gather together or in what capacity, what is the right space and time for it. So I think examples of this will continue evolve. But I'd like to also zoom out a little bit and highlight that all these flexible work arrangement trends are evolving alongside sustainability trend, especially in Singapore. Here we have a serious mandate for greening our buildings. And I think by 2030, there is a mandate to have 80% of buildings in Singapore by GFA to be green. Mm-hmm. That means reduce carbon footprint, energy efficiency, and different aspects of sustainability. This is by URA, and a lot of part of the infrastructure of society. We see that they're already moving towards that. In 2021, just after COVID, basically this number was 49%. This shows that how we are moving fast towards that target. And interestingly, recently at Knight Frank, we had a survey to see basically ESG literacy in the society, and we see it is pretty much appreciated by corporate offices in Singapore, whether local or international. They see the high importance of that. And when we asked companies and business leaders, why do you think this matters to you and your organization? Number one, by 64%, was retention and attraction of talent.
Mm-hmm.
So it is very interesting for me personally to see that we are really going to build future-proof offices that are talent-centric. We are really focusing our attention in terms of business, really, to take care of our people and take care of our planet. So these two are evolving together.
Nice.
Good.
Sounds like there are no additional trends I want to add. Let's go. You can't stop me from talking. So I will say
It's a planet, the
Planet and
people. Yeah.
We need one more P.
Places.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, the places.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Well, I do think if we think about the future of work and how it's evolving, we need to evolve as well as businesses. So the workplace, our workplace policies are just part of how we are adapting to this future, right? We know, for example, that the demographics are changing for the workforce. Younger people are coming in, more tech savvy, wanting more well-being. And certainly, having a little bit more flexibility is going to help them be more productive. I think this is the generation that will teach us how to properly work in the future of work. We are still struggling because we are one foot in the old world, one foot in the new. We're still in charge, so it's difficult. But when they come into play, they will start making changes that I think will help us propel forward. So they'll be more creative in the way they approach work design. They will be looking for more autonomy in how they choose what they want to do and go about it. And they want more freedom in the places that they work. So choice in terms of place. So all of these things will not go away. These trends will stay. And I believe that if we are able to find ways to capture these talents, then we'll have access to more talent, like through the gig economy, through profiles that are not traditional, using a variety of tools.
I think it's a good way to wrap up the discussion on this. And I think we can see that this impending FWA guidelines is only a pivotal moment in the so-called the ongoing evolution of work, right? So by embracing flexible work arrangement and also designing work processes and workspaces that support them, organization can unlock significant benefits. Right. So, but of course, we understand that to ensure a smooth transition and maximizing the different potential of different staff. So it is crucial to consider, carefully in terms of, different technology infrastructure, different employee well-being and motivation, and of course, having an effective communication and policies will be very helpful. Right, so that means there's no one size fit all solution, as different companies have different goals and different needs. Okay, so we also love to hear your thoughts. So do share with us your experiences with flexible work arrangement and workplace design in the comments below or on our social media channels. So I hope to continue our conversation and shape the future of work together.
Basically, have you ever seen a Gen Z arrive before 10? Oh, that was more for her.
Bring it down.